So we've already looked at tables a little bit along with the other objects, but now let's create our own table. What I like to do is just click on Create and Table Design. Now this takes us into a table design, and our cursor is blinking in this first cell, and it's called Field Name. Now I'm going to pretend we want to track some students. So the first thing I'm going to do is put in a first name as the first item of information. But what is a field? A field is a database term. It's not really an access term. All databases I can think of use the term field to refer to each item of information that you keep. So address, city, first name, phone, anything, all those are fields. So in this case, we're going to have a field, get my mouse cursor out of the way, a field called first name. So I'll do that. I type that in and I press enter. Now I go to a second column here in the structure of this new table. It's called data type. Now, if you've used spreadsheets a lot, you might get frustrated at this because with Excel, you just start typing. You can put anything in there. And that's really the problem. Because you don't have to define anything, you can have a whole column of numbers and somebody by mistake can put some words in the middle of that. That's where a lot of the errors come from in Excel. With Access, you have to define the data type. If you define as a date type, for instance, Access won't let you put words into a date field. You can't put letters into a number field, things like that. Plus, you can do all kinds of manipulations. Using date as an example, you can do days between dates or what the month of a given date is, things like that. So it's well worth it. Now, one of the things I love about Access is it's got these little pull downs. See this little pull down here? I love that. If I'm over here, it's gone. But if I'm here where I could use a pull down, it shows up. So that's what Access is about to a large degree. They've done all kinds of things to keep the clutter down, but still give you all the choices you need when you want them. Now I'm going to click on this pull down and look at all these different kinds of data. Now there is a PDF attached to this lecture that shows you the details on the different data types and what some of the limits are, but I'll just go over some of them right now. Most of the time you'll use short text. Short text is just like an Excel cell, 255 characters, letters, numbers, spaces, anything. That's what most of it will be. If you use long text, or in older versions of Access, that's called a memo field, you can have up to, I think it's 64,000 characters of information. So you could tie just a whole long note section to each student in our little student table, for instance. Then number, we'll use numbers, we use dates. Currency is a special kind of number, and auto number is a special kind of number also. We'll use all of those. Then you can have true-false fields called yes or no. They can be on or off, true or false. You can format them for how you want them to appear. But by default, they're checkboxes. So you've used those a lot in Windows. We're not going to touch on OLE objects, which is like a graphic object, but they're easy to deal with. You can put pictures into your database, for instance. We will do a hyperlink, which is just a link to a web location. And then the last two we're not going to use this course because you hardly ever use them. So I'm going to use this as short text. I'm going to press enter. In our third column, notice it says optional. It's just a description of what this field is. You can leave notes to yourself or somebody else in the structure of the table telling them about what this field is. In this case, I'm just going to press enter, and that'll take me down to the next line where I'll type last name, and I'll press enter. If I have short text, which I do, I'll just press enter again. That's why it's nice to have a default of short text. And then I'll go down to the next line. Let's say we wanted to know if the students were currently enrolled. We can put in enrolled as a field, and then let's say we want a yes/no field for that. I'll just hit the letter Y. Don't even need to use the pull down, and press enter. And let's say we wanted to have their GPA also. I'll press enter, and now I'm going to do a number. Now watch what happens We're going to go over these, see where it says field properties. We'll go over these in detail in a later lecture, but watch what happens to the properties when I press enter. Do you see how they changed a little bit? And that's because Access realized that I picked a number up here on the top. And you can't just have a number, you need to also sometimes be aware of what kind of number it is. Notice there's another pull down. And it says long integer. All that means is a whole number. And long, it has to do with how much space internally Access is allocating for this number. That's the default. It's about plus or minus 2 billion. So it can be a big number. But no decimals. It's a whole number. If I pull down the list, there's also things called single, double, byte, integer. You can forget about all of those and just use these two. Long integer is the default. Double lets you do decimals. There are some people that say, well, you should use single if you can. The computers are fast enough, it doesn't make any difference anymore. So just use long integer for whole numbers. I'm going to use double because I can't put in like a 3.56 grade point average if I have an integer. Okay, so I'm going to click up here on the description, and now I can continue with my structure. I'll go down to the next line. Let's say I wanted the date of birth. I'll just make that a date. I just hit the letter D. I can press enter twice. And let's see, tuition. That's a currency type. I hit the letter C. And for the last one, let's say website. For lack of a better term, this will be a hyperlink. And that's our structure of our students table. Now to save our table, all I have to do is go to View. I'll click on View. And it says I have to save the table to view it. So I'll click on yes, I want to do that. And I'll just call it students. And I'll click OK. Now I get a notice there's no primary key, whatever that is. So do you want a primary key? I'm going to say no because we're going to come right back and make a primary key. So I'll click on no. There's our table. First name, last name. And I can go ahead and type. I'll just type John Smith enrolled. I can click on it or I can hit the space bar to turn it on or off. Let's say we've got a 3.78 GPA. The date of birth, notice there's a little calendar that pops up. But I can also, let's say it's January 6th of 1989. And I'll press enter. Notice it put the 19 in there. Incidentally, there's a limit on dates because watch what happens if I do 1/1/29. It says 2029. That's the future. If I do 1/1/30, it does 1930. Right now, Windows has a built-in. It has to know which century to use, and so they've decided to use 29. So if you're ever going to put in a date like 1919, you'd have to put in 1/1/1919, or it's going to think it's 2019. Okay. Otherwise, you can type in like an 89, and it'll put the 19 in. The tuition, I can just put in a number and press enter. Formats that, and let's say google.com. That'll be my website. So when I pressed enter, I went down to the next line, and I can start entering another student. Now what I want to do is to modify this and put in that primary key I referred to. So we'll do that in the next lecture. See you then.